What up, though? And welcome to the Living Noir podcast. I'm your host, Delaney. I'm a serial entrepreneur residing on the south side of Chicago, and I'm currently on the journey to retire my 9-to-5 job and become my wildest manifestations. The Living Noir podcast was created to share all of my wins, the lessons, not the losses, and everything in between. It's basically my journal. And my goal is to connect, empower, and inspire individuals to become their wildest positive manifestations by creating positive examples of determining self-worth, normalizing and advancing the conversation of mental health and generational wealth amongst the Black and Brown communities, and most importantly, creating and fueling our passions and hobbies to become foundations for our future success. So break bread with me as we all go on this journey together. And it all starts with taking the first step, and my step starts right now. What up, though, everybody? Welcome back to the Living Noir podcast with me, Delaney. I am the host. I always appreciate you checking in with me for another episode of the show. Today's episode is, of course, a special episode. I want to go over and discuss something that may be vulnerable to a lot of people. And I mean, I guess it's showing vulnerability for me, but it's still a conversation that I want to talk about because I don't see it out there as much, or at least amongst like people close to me. But I want to speak a little bit about how I was introduced to therapy. Like I said, it's somewhat of a vulnerable topic, especially for people amongst minority communities. And unfortunately, for that reason, it's often viewed as a negative stigmatism. Now, I will say this at least. Therapy is available for any and everyone who chooses to receive it. But I also understand that it may not be for everyone, and that's perfectly fine as well. My only ask is that if you choose not to use therapy as a form of mental health regulations, then please don't trash it to other people. It does help, and it does provide assistance to others that do appreciate it. And if you don't go to therapy, that's perfectly fine. Like I mentioned, I just hope that you have some sort of outlet that you use to keep you regular. Because nowadays, we all need something to keep us regular. And whatever that is, as long as in a healthy way, you're not hurting anyone, you're not hurting yourself, by all means, go for it. So today, like I said, I want to discuss some of those negative stigmas, break them down, and understand some of the root causes as to why talking to a therapist has gotten such a rap. And then I'll delve into my ongoing journey with therapy. I'll talk about a few resources and some tips that I've learned throughout, and why I believe therapy is important to creating that blueprint to discovering who you are, and again, manifesting and becoming the best version of yourself. And of course, we're going to wrap up with this week's audiobook of the week. So let's get to it. But before we do get into it, it's, one of those rising parts of the show. It's time to get into a quick ad. So here we go. Let's get this first ad out of the way. All right, check it out. This is a hot take, but it's an obvious take. I had one of the best weddings of all time. And I say that in my best Kanye West voice. I mean, you had to obviously be there, but the love and the energy in the room was just enormous. And if you were there, then you definitely know what I'm talking about. And of course, since I had the greatest wedding of all time, I had to make sure that I had the greatest photographer of all time there to capture it all. Chuck Olu-Alabi is a beast with the camera. His shots are crisp, candid photos are phenomenal, and his shot creation is so innovative. Chef's kiss. I've used Chuck for my wedding and two other occasions. So at this point, I pretty much swear by him. Hence is the reason for this ad. But most importantly, his passion and ability to be personable amongst a large group of people is spectacular, especially with my groom. But don't get it twisted. He's not just a wedding photographer. My guy has worked with clients such as the Gray Matter Experience, Getty Images, Inspire STL, and many more. Bro was even featured recently on WGN as a black business to highlight. But don't take my word for it. I mean, yeah, take my word for it. But check him out for yourself is what I'm saying. Visit his website and his Instagram page for more of his work. He's on Instagram as at Chuck Olu-Alabi, and that's spelled ChuckOlualabi. That's again ChuckOlualabi. That's also how you visit his website. It's chuckolualabi.com. You for sure will not be disappointed with any of his work. And also, let him know that I sent you there, because as you already know at this point, these ads are pretty much free. They're really just shout outs of people who I really appreciate in the spaces that you may be looking for. So make sure you check them out. Tell them I sent you, but let's get back to the show. All right, and I am back. So, all right, where was I? Therapy. Yeah. Okay, question. Before I get into it, why is it that when it comes to using the word therapy in a normal conversation, there's sometimes the perception that there's this immediate thought like, oh shit, this person's seeing a therapist? Damn, something must be truly wrong with them if they're stretched out on a stranger's couch just telling them all of their problems. Pity them, you know? Or you may hear someone say, I don't need therapy because, I talk to God every day, and that's perfect, right? You have a personal relationship with God. Hell, mostly, if not all of us do, but I am quite certain that God would not have not a problem with you also creating a personal relationship with the therapist as well. He actually may be guiding you to that space to help you, just to have another person on your team. Of course, you want to have God on your team, and he should be there, but it wouldn't help, having someone else on your team to help you with regulating a couple of things. But there's this one too, and this one's kind of my favorite. You don't need to talk to a therapist. You can talk to me about your problems. Okay, so then who do I talk to when I need to talk about you? Like I said, I'm not here to convince anyone to do something that they don't want to do. However, my hope is to tell you about why it works for me, and if it hooks you or if it moves you to taking a step forward to starting your journey, then that's great. You know what I mean? But like I said, you have to experience it for yourself. As for me, well, I started going to therapy in it was like around winter of 2017. I think it was like February. So 2017, that's like 5 years now, and some people listening are like, damn, bro, you've been going for 5 years? I didn't even know you were struggling for that long. There's a few things wrong with that statement. One, just because you're in therapy doesn't necessarily mean that you are like any more fucked up than the person that's not going, right? Two, the sessions are for me. So it's not like it's something that I have to advertise if it isn't truly necessary, because it's only for me and my personal development. So I can choose to share it with whomever I want to. If I don't want to say anything, that's on me, because it's only for me. If I choose to share it, that's also for me. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to you have to make that distinction first and foremost. And number three, so it's like, do you think that you have it all together yourself? Mr. 40-year-old, another aspiring rapper, check out my SoundCloud link looking ass. I'm just playing, but just for the record, like, I don't know any 40-year-old aspiring rappers. I was just joking. But if I intentionally hit some, or if you think that I may have intentionally hit you, then I'm not sorry. I'm just playing. Follow your dreams, bro. Follow your dreams. I'm really just playing here. Anyway, let me get back to it, right? So I can't really recall like the exact moment that got me to where it was like, yo, I'm at a point to where I gotta see a therapist. I can't really recall what that is, but I do know that a few years prior to 2017, I want to say back in like 2015, right around the time when I turned 25, I had said that, I just wanted better for myself, in every way. I wanted to be healthier, mentally, physically, emotionally. I just wanted to be able to learn and understand, some of the things that I do and understand why I do those things or why certain things happen to me, throughout my life or whatever, just to gain a better, clear, like a better idea of where I am or who I am, So it wasn't like I was just having like a breakdown at the moment and then I just started going like 2 years later. Or maybe it was. I really don't remember. But if it was something like that, I feel like I definitely will remember. And I was like, that was the breaking point that got me there. But I truly don't. But no, it was just me being more curious, I'd say. Curious as to my own personal nature and why I do things. There are so many thoughts, ideas, scenarios, feelings, other random shit that I think about on a daily basis that it just, after a while, it starts to get crowded in my head, of course, so I just thought it would be cool to have a dedicated space that I can just focus on me and be able to get my thoughts out and have someone tell me if what I'm saying or thinking makes sense or if I'm just on a whole bunch of BS, so it just, for me, it was just something that like I could use as like a filter of what's important, what I can hold on to, what I need to get rid of. But I needed that to basically take the thoughts that were in my head and throw them out in the open, so I could just really start taking inventory. And I also wanted to establish a relationship with someone that was outside of my circle, right? A couple of reasons why. Because it, one, reduces the amount of biases that, someone may have. And I could talk and not have to worry about having to swap sob stories or cater to the other person's feelings or hold back or, it just... I actually like the fact that, speaking with a stranger kind of removes all of those things. That's why it never really bothered me when people was like, you just want to tell everything to a stranger. If anything, it makes it more like it puts you in a position to where it makes you feel a lot better because this person doesn't know you at all. You know what I'm saying? So they're already in a space where it's a place of not judging you, but they don't know who you are, so they don't know who your biases are towards or anything like that. You can say the raw shit to them and it really wouldn't matter because they don't know the other person that's affiliated, right? They know how you feel about that person. They know what you've been saying. So it's like you just need that person to relay it to, and it's, in its rawest version sometimes. So, like I said, that never really bothered me. It just made it more enticing to me to be able to do that, but the big thing about it is like, when people say that it's a stranger, I mean, yeah, it's a stranger in a way that you don't know who that person is, but that doesn't but you do know that they're licensed and they're accredited, or at least they should be, so you should probably, and you do all of that research before you even sit down and talk with them. So even still around this time, around 2017, I still didn't have any idea on how I could even find a therapist or what I should do first, so I did, of course, the first thing everybody else would do or anything like that, but I would hit up Google, right? And the only thing that I knew that I did want was that I wanted a therapist that was Black, right? This was my only requirement because if I want to become comfortable, become a little bit more vulnerable with someone and I'm being introduced to this space, I kind of wanted someone who looked like me just to make it a little bit more relatable to, just the culture or how, our dynamic is, with like older generations in our communities, Sometimes in the professional space, dealing with microaggressions, dealing with just the day-to-day, but just someone who, could understand even those intangible moments that, you can't really put language to, but you kind of, that you can, if I were to tell somebody else, another friend of mine or something like that, it'd be like, yeah, they can provide some insight and like, yeah, that moment happened to me too. I get it. I understand. So that was my only thing that I wanted, right? Or at least so it gave me a sense of comfort in a moment where I'm trying to be uncomfortable. So finding a Black therapist, it can be difficult, but it's not impossible, right? So going back to Google, so literally for me, the first step I did was just type into Google, African American therapist near me in Chicago. And I surveyed a few websites, and then I found this website called, I found this website called psychologytoday.com. And it was basically like the yellow pages for therapists. And please tell me you know what the yellow pages are. But even, I was even able to sort by specializing in African American backgrounds or something like that. I can't even remember what it was, but eventually I was able to find someone based off of their website, look at their bio, and, I just got an initial feeling, right? So I reached out for an introduction. I wasn't even sure how payment would work or anything like that. I mean, I had health insurance through my job, but I had always assumed that, this service wasn't always covered under your primary health insurance, and that I would have to just pay some wild amount. But at this point, I didn't want my fear or my perception to stop me from actually checking something out that I don't know. You know what I mean? So I was able to find out that yes, therapy can be covered under your insurance as long as the therapist that you choose is in network. And if they're in network with your provider, then you're only more than likely going to have to pay whatever the copay may be. So whatever the insurance doesn't cover, you'll have to cover that copay. Some situations that payment, I think, can range from depending on the provider and your insurance, all of that can probably range from $20 to $50 or something like that, right? So that's good to know that, if you were wondering, at least, you want to at least try to find somebody that's in network. If you're not insured or if you have someone out of network, I believe you can just reach out to the therapist, and they'll be able to provide you with what their rates and their offerings are. You can still look at Google for options for maybe some free sessions. I may have a little bit more information about that moving forward in future episodes, but you can definitely still, do some research on your own to see what works best for you in that space. So, anyway, so I scheduled a session with the therapist, and I wasn't really knowing what exactly to expect. So I get there, and this is 2017, and I get to the session, and I sit there, and I just started talking, right, about any and everything that came to my mind. It was kind of it just started out with kind of telling my origin story, right? It's kind of you're just going through from the beginning, and just using that as a starting point, right? And she just listened and acknowledged, and it helped at least to, for me, that she probably at the time was maybe about couldn't have been no more than 5 or 6 years older than me. So for me, it was easier because it felt like we connected on a level that we're in a similar generational span, that she could relate on some of the things that I was talking about. So What I also liked about it is that there were periods during that first session where I would describe, a conflict or a situation where I was like lost about something that I should do. And like I would feel like I've looked at this scenario from every angle, from frontwards, backwards, upside down, round and round, like all of that. I've already looked at every angle possible. And I've presented all of these different angles to her. And then she would just turn around and say, well, why not just consider doing this angle or doing something like that? And it would be just something so obvious that I was, that I would be caught up in my own thoughts that I couldn't even recognize that what she said was another actual option. And I didn't even figure that. And it probably was the best option, right? Because I was just so caught up in my own thoughts and I couldn't even recognize it. I thought that shit was so dope. It was so simple, but it was like mind blowing. And after that first session, I felt lighter. Like a weight had just been lifted. It felt really, really good. It felt right. It felt like I was in the right place at the right time. And I was hooked at that point, like I wanted to go back. I wanted to run it back and do it again. So I went on to meet with her for maybe about a year and a half. And she was moving out of state, so I was left to have to find another therapist. So eventually I found another one, and I was on and off with him for about a year and a half. And hell, even now, I feel like I've built like a team of therapists that I use for various reasons. I have, I got one, they help me figure out a lot of shit. But that's what I'm finding that works for me. I have a therapist that helps me with reflecting on what's heavy on my mind for that week. What projects that I have to work on or just do that, like kind of like organizing my week or trying to like minimize the fears that I may have of something that I'm anticipating, just helping me tackle just the week to week stuff. And then I have another one who I'm working with who's like helping me with, digging deep, kind of getting into and delving into the past of how I've acted or, trying to learn from some of the things that I've experienced, both good and bad, and how they've helped to get me to this point. A lot of the things that, may have not been healthy coping mechanisms that I'm working through to like become something better than what I was before, but just understanding that like a lot of those behaviors that I had before, I couldn't put language to. And, I'm still learning that I can now put a lot of language to a lot of those things. And that truly helps with understanding who I am. So, it's great because at a point in time, I couldn't do that. I wasn't able to do that, or I wasn't even willing to do that. So don't get it twisted, right? Like therapy is work. Right. And just like they say, everything is work. You work hard to get, the best out of everything. You work hard to get the best out of your marriage. You work hard to get the best out of your job, your career, your whatever. Right. Therapy is the same thing. If you want the best out of your mental health, you have to put in the work in order to do that. So not only does it require you to be okay with being vulnerable with sharing that, but you also have to allow yourself to sit in those moments that make you feel uncomfortable, to truly try to figure it out. Because again, growth comes in the moments where you become uncomfortable. So when it comes to change or something like that, something you're not used to, and it makes you feel uncomfortable, it requires you either to adapt, basically, right? So trust me, like even with my self-proclaimed team, I still got a shit ton of work that I need to do in order to figure myself out even more. But I'm grateful that I even made the decision to try it out in the first place, because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't make that initial step five plus years ago at this point, right? So the vulnerability has only made me stronger and more resilient for it. And I believe that for me, it'll be a constant figure in my life. It's like a tool in my toolbox that I use to truly figure out how to navigate through life and truly figure out who I am, right? But again, that's my experience. Everybody else's experience is different. And of course, like I said, I've started going to therapy back in 2017. And since then, the conversation regarding mental health has only become more and more prominent, right? Especially like during the Ponderosa. And I think that the Panera Bread really put in perspective like how important it is to maintain our mental health, in order just to stay sane, just on a daily basis. That period during the pandemic, like it really shedded a lot of light on, just the average person and how the day-to-day brings a lot of stresses to people, So, but even with the pandemic and it shining a lot of light on this, there's still, some amongst the community that truly feel that like therapy may be a ruse, or they even still consider it weak. Why is that? I'll never forget the time when I was having a conversation with one of my older relatives, and they were having a moment where they were telling me a few of the current stresses that were on the forefront of their minds and how they were having a difficult time kind of dealing with all of the things. And, I was listening and understanding and at this point I was just like, hey, like, it really sounds like you're going through a lot right now and you're having to deal with a lot. And I hear that weight on you. Have you considered maybe, talking to a therapist about some of this stuff just to, maybe help with giving you a different perspective, just to pull off some of that weight off of you or whatever? And then the phone got quiet for maybe half a second. And then all of a sudden, a burst of laughter just erupted, And then the person was like, "You're joking, right?" I was dead ass. And I told the person, I was like, I go to therapy and it helps me with organizing my thoughts, and I can focus on things that I have actual control over. And then I can let go of some of the things that I can't really control, And then they followed up and said, I have my therapist in Jesus and he'll work it with me. And I said that he will, you know what I mean? And then I just left it alone, right? So, and that's their thought process. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I see so many different examples amongst my community of us having to portray like this hard shell and not show any sign of emotion, because showing emotion like is a sign of weakness. And I understand why that was a thing for us, because like our older generations, they didn't have the ability to show emotion, right? Emotion could get you clowned. Emotion could get you fired. Hell, it could even get you killed. And if Pawpaw missed one shift at the plant and called off and said that he needed a mental health day, the plant would have for sure clipped him, fired him with the absolute quickness, causing more stress on Pawpaw because he's the only provider for the family, right? So I get it, right? I get it that at a certain period of time, like maintaining your mental health wasn't at the top of the list of priorities to do, but it went neglected for so long that the negative stigma has been passed down from generation to generation. But like I mentioned earlier, one of the strongest things that you can do is just be vulnerable and learn more about how you operate in ways that you couldn't even imagine, right? It's definitely okay for you to not be okay. And there's so much power in admitting just that alone that it'll take you to where you want to get to, right? Because all of that underlying stress and the past trauma that we all have experienced has been bottled up for so long and untreated that you'd be surprised how much that could lead to our bodies just breaking down and just eroding, because we've put up these barriers and we put up this fence it's just a brick wall, and we won't, tear it down or try to figure out, how did this wall get here? What can we do to kind of like break it down some, you got high blood pressure, you got cancer, you got strokes. Like, those are like some of the major reasons, of course, for, a lot of death amongst the community. And a lot of stress can lead and accelerate these diseases as well. So maybe try to consider one session. It couldn't hurt, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, you just had one session. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. All right. Now, before I wrap up this week's topic and get into the audiobook of the week, you know what time it is. I got another ad that I'm going to break you off with, and then we will be right back to it. So let's get into it right now. All right. This part of the Living Noir podcast is brought to you by Black Yogi Nico Marie. All right. With recently celebrating over 25,000 subscribers on YouTube, Nico Marie's mission is to create a space for her community to receive the health and healing benefits of yoga. In her videos, she provides awesome content on how to practice meditations while confirming affirmations, yoga for detox, spiritual connection, and she even has a video on how to do yoga when you don't feel like doing yoga. Bro, she got it all figured out. So make sure you subscribe to her YouTube channel, and you can check her out on Instagram as well. Again, her YouTube channel is Black Yogi Nico Marie, Nicomare on YouTube. And also you can follow her on Instagram at Yoga with Nico. Let me tell you something. Even if you're a beginner, intermediate, or you're advanced, her videos are fantastic. Okay. I mean, it's kind of like a personal session every time, and she does great work with the affirmation part, which is huge. So make sure you check out her content, subscribe to her channel on YouTube, follow her on Instagram, blow her up, like her videos, do the comments, do it all. Let her know Delaney sent you, and let's get back to the show. And we're back. So now we're in the back end of today's episode, and I wanted to provide you with a few resources that you can look into if you're trying to see if a therapist may be right for you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, like, one starter option is to check with your insurance provider and just check their website to see if they have a database or a list of therapists that they consider to be in network. I know I have Blue Cross Blue Shield, so you can search on their website and actually look for the care physician that you're looking for whatever. I mean, while you're there, do your checkup, your annual checkup, because it's probably been a minute. You know what I'm saying? And just check and see if you can find a mental health therapist there from the website. So take a moment. Check out the roster of the people, check out their bios, their websites, and you want to kind of narrow down the search to like the top 3 that you have the most interest in, right? I say 3 because you'll want to use those, and I'll tell you a little bit later about why you want to choose the 3, basically, right? So that's 1 through your insurance provider, but you can also use virtual platforms like BetterHelp and Talkspace. After going through on both of those websites, you just have a quick questionnaire that both of the platforms require you to complete. And then once you complete the questionnaire, they use that to kind of help guide you to, a couple recommended therapists that they feel that you may be able to mesh pretty well with based off of the responses that you provided. Another one is ZocDoc. ZocDoc was pretty cool too because it was just it's an app, by the way, ZocDoc. So you can use that as well. Same thing. It's just another database that has licensed physicians for any type of care on there, including therapy, including general medicine, whatever. So you can use those platforms. Now, I'll share something that I did while I was looking for a therapist. Now, this goes back to what I had mentioned about, you wanting to choose 3, because 1, you don't have to settle for the first therapist that you meet with, right? you kind of want to treat this as if like you're in the process of dating, right? You want to take a moment to first, before you start doing anything, you want to figure out what you want from your therapist. And so that's what I had to do. I had to take a moment and actually sit and say, okay, well, what do I want out of this, right? How do I, what type of help am I looking for? And how do I want them to help me with accomplishing those goals? So what I wanted was, I wanted someone who was not only going to help me with, learning a lot of the ways that I operate, but also someone who's going to challenge me in order to grow, right? Challenge me on how I think or how I act or, how I move, so I wanted that. So that was my first thing, and then after I did that, after I wrote out, what I wanted, I then narrowed my search down to 3 people. And then after that, I reached out to each one via email just to see if they'd agree to have maybe like a 5 to 10 minute introductory call or something like that, so that, I can feel the vibes. You know what I'm saying? I'm the vibes, you feel me? So like, you want that. That's important because, again, like if you, at any point you get a bad vibe or you don't feel as if like this, because therapists are people as well, right? You have to still be able to connect on some sort of level. So there's still that area where it's like, you may feel like you and this person may not be in touch after that first 5 minutes because they didn't leave you with a great feeling. And that's happened to me, it felt at one time, and luckily, like, this wasn't my first time choosing, so it didn't full off deter me, but I had a conversation with someone and I was kind of just explaining to them the process, and be transparent too. It's like, hey, look, I'm in the process of looking for a new therapist. I've been reaching out to a couple. I just wanted to take a few moments to speak with you just to see how you can, how you mesh with that other person, because again, like, you want some sort of comfort or comfortability when it comes to finding this therapist, because if you're going to be vulnerable, you want to feel at least a baseline of comfort there, right? And then one of the people that I spoke with just really wasn't there. I was kind of talking, and then I would ask, about their experience and how long they've been doing it, what type of methods that they use, and it was a little dry, you know what I mean? And that person may have been having a bad day. They may not, it could have been whatever, right? But it just didn't vibe well with me. So I was like, okay, well, so I've had that happen to me before, and that's perfectly okay, right? So, like I said, you just want to figure out who's going to mesh well with you, and don't be afraid to say what you want. If you want to be challenged, then say that. Say you want to be challenged. If you want to have a space to where you can just have a 1-hour word vomit session, then say that. Whatever it is, just make sure that you're being intentional, because the session is basically for you, right? It's not for anybody else. You have to remember that. The session is designed, you're paying for it, right? It's designed for you and your personal growth and nobody else. So it's okay for you to be selfish in these moments. Don't forget that, right? Oh, and also, like I said, don't be afraid to let them know, like, hey, you know what? This isn't really working for me. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to go in a different direction. That's perfectly fine. You're not going to hurt their feelings. That's their profession. They should also actually encourage that as well, because they're aware that, every person is not going to mesh well with them. And some people like their methods, other people may not, so that's perfectly fine. You have to be able to be okay with saying, knowing what you don't want, right? So for me, throughout all of this experience of being in therapy, I've really learned a lot, and I truly enjoy it. I enjoy it, even though, like, every time I have a session, there's like this rush of anxiety that I have when I'm getting ready for a session, right? Every time, but I love it. I like it, because again, it gives me that area for me to be able to truly work on myself. So there's a few things that I've learned throughout my time. One of the things is just practicing grace with myself. And I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but just being graceful with myself, right? So trying not to take things so seriously and be so hard on myself, right? So leading with grace for myself has allowed me to provide me, or it's provided me with the portion of self-awareness that I can recognize that if I'm being hard on myself, if I'm expecting so much from myself, then imagine what it's doing to the next person, right? Imagine what the next person is going through. Probably something similar, if not more, could be less, doesn't really matter, right? But just having that understanding that, if I'm already doing this to myself, then it's got to be tough for them too. It could be tough for them too, just on a human level. So it's important that it's gotten me to the point to where I notice that it's important to just be polite and be cordial just to strangers. It's not really hard to do that, right? Because you don't know what the next person is going through. You don't know what they're dealing with on a daily basis. We all are moving through life. We have good days, we have bad days, and sometimes you may get caught within the crosshairs of a good day or a bad day, right? If you see that somebody's flipping out because their breakfast order was slightly off or something like that, they're flipping out because their burger came with cheese and they said for no cheese, right? Like, you can see that and recognize that it's like, shit, like that person is definitely not tripping out because this burger has cheese on it and they didn't want cheese. There's definitely something else that's going on that's really like getting them to this point, and it's easy to recognize that. So then you don't have to match that energy. Usually I'll say something to the effect of like, hey, I hope that the rest of your day gets better, right? Because we all have bad days and you just want them to be able to take that moment and move past it and learn from it, right? But I've also learned to take the time to just like reflect. This was really powerful for me, and what I mean by reflecting is like actually like sitting and taking the time to think about like certain events that have happened in my life that are both positive and negative, and sit with those moments and just analyze and think about or write about like how those moments have put you in the position that you're currently in right now, right? Like what you've learned from those. And then you'll start to notice that there are like small habits or small routines that you've been doing, subconsciously this entire time that, they attribute to the positive things that you do and some of the negative things that you do. And then once you start to analyze those even further by reflecting on them, you can then start pinpointing, okay, this doesn't really work for me. This isn't the most productive way for me to be, to accomplish what I'm looking for. So maybe I should try to work on changing this up. Or, you know what? I just noticed that after I've been putting this together for so long and I've been talking about this, I've done this example here, and here. And I've done this in this situation. They've all resulted in success. I think that works for me. I like that. I'm going to now be conscious of that because I know that that's a pillar that works for me. And you start to learn more about yourself and how you operate. And lastly, this is something that I'm still constantly trying to work and practice, is just staying present, right? Now, if you know me, I'm always thinking about the next move. Sometimes it's helpful so I don't get content, but other times I find myself struggling and stressing myself out even more because I'm so busy looking in the distance at what's ahead that I can't appreciate where I'm at and what also is right in front of me. So I constantly have to remind myself to stay and remain present. And, that's like one of the pillars. That's another pillar that I've been, practicing and telling myself, so that way it helps me with not, stressing myself out even further on something that's not even available, or even projecting, you know what I mean? Because projecting what I think may be coming, because you think you see it in the distance, and it just creates a lot of undue stress. So practicing staying present is very important for me, right? So yeah, man, that was a lot. So I think that's really all that I got today on the topic. I really hope that, all of the info and the story that I've shared kind of helps steers you in the direction to seek a therapist, if that's what you've been thinking about prior to listening, right? Or you've had those conversations, with yourself. You can reach out to me, talk to me about it. And if you want a little more information about how I started and, what worked for me, what doesn't work, and, just reach out to me or whatever, because, like I said, and again, this isn't my opinion. You don't have a lot to lose by trying it, right? The worst thing that you could do is you had one conversation one time with a stranger and it was a one and done, right? We do that all the time, right? We talk to strangers on the street. We talk to strangers at the bar. We talk to a stranger at the bar and then end up seeing them, leaving them the next day in the morning and never hearing from them again, right? So if you're able to do that, like, the worst thing that can happen in this is that you had a conversation about yourself with a licensed therapist that may be able to help you with creating a blueprint on how you can be better for yourself, right? But again, I would love to hear, if you have chosen to, or if you already have a therapist, what was the reason why you chose to go? How long has your relationship been with the therapist? What have you learned from that experience? Or if you haven't, are you still against it? Or what is your point of view as to, what works best for you? I also want to learn, what are some other routines that you may be practicing that helps regulate you? You know what I mean? So just check in with me and let me know what you thought and what you've decided to do. And I hope that, with these, like I mentioned, I hope that with this information that it at least gets you to move one step further towards therapy, if that's what you choose, or, it starts to plant a seed for you to give you a little bit more to do research on, but whatever it is, just, I want to know about it. So let me know. But we're about to get out of here, right? And again, I always appreciate, the support and listening. But before we do get out of here, it's time for my favorite segment of the show, and it is the audiobook of the week. Now, before we get into this week's book, did you check out last week's book? The 48 Laws of Power. Dope, right? I told you I wouldn't steer you wrong. Like, it's a really good book. Like I said, I use it as a reference book, but the laws in there are something that you can just start to practice, just reading and see how they actually work in everyday life, right? But for this week's book, I went with an author who I've mentioned before previously on the podcast, and it's his second book that's titled Shook Ones: Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me by Leonard, Charlamagne the God, McKelvey. Did I say it right this time, Meech? The audiobook is also read by the author, so that helps, if you are one of those people like me who like to, listen to audiobooks, especially if they're read by the author, especially if I know who the author is. It kind of helps me because it feels like that person is talking to me. Shout out to Obama, OBZ, because it felt like him and I was just chopping it up about his time in the White House. But that's neither here nor there. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Charla. And in this one, Charlamagne is really talking about his ongoing dealings with depression and anxiety that he's dealt with throughout his life and career. And what's really great and relatable about this book is that at one point, Charla notes that he's having these feelings of anxiety and depression and PTSD, and he noticed that, he's had these feelings for the majority of his life, but he wasn't always able to put a word to it, right? He just knew that his body would tense up for whatever reason, and he just thought it was just a normal thing that would just happen, and he just had to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? But it wasn't until years later, when he decided to go to therapy, that he was able to put language to a lot of these things. He was able to note that, there was one time, I think it was at an airport, or he was getting ready to get on a flight, and he was having a really bad panic attack and didn't understand what exactly it was. He was hyperventilating, sweating, palms sweaty, knees weak, arms spaghetti, all of that stuff, and didn't understand what exactly was going on. But again, it wasn't until he started going to therapy that he was able to realize, oh damn, I was having a panic attack at that time, and it did wonders for him, because before he would be frustrated because he didn't understand what these feelings meant, and just thought that it was just something that you just dealt with growing up. And being able to put language to that truly helped him to understand that, okay, when I feel like this, I'm having a panic attack, it's gonna, it's okay, and then you can acknowledge it and then address it at that point, because you already know what it is. But before, by not knowing what it was, caused a lot of just strife for him. So check out the book. It's a really good one. Again, Shook Ones, Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me, right? So check it out. Let me know if you like the book, if it resonates with you, or whatever the case may be, right? And just like that, we're done. And that's it. That's all I got this week. I really thank you from the bottom of my heart, right? I really appreciate you listening and supporting the Living the Wire podcast. The support has been truly tremendous. So subscribe, like, share, review the podcast. Give me a 5-star review if you like what you hear. Tell at least one person about it. And then make sure that you follow me on Instagram. You can follow my page, which is L Delaney L. So that's LDELANEYL. And you can follow the podcast page at Living Noir. That's LIVING0IR. And make sure you follow the Facebook and the YouTube page, The Living Noir Podcast. And with that being said, I'm out this piece, right? And the quote of the week is very simple this week, right? It's really simple. Just know that it's okay to not be okay. I'll check in with y'all next time. Keep moving forward. Peace.